Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Visit Tuscaloosa.
So we're bearing up for the jump around, a tradition between the third and fourth quarters.
That is absolutely cool. Full disclaimer before we even get started. I didn't go to the game. I watched it in my living room, and yes, I was jumping around in my living room while House of Pain was playing going to the fourth quarter. Were you, Rodney?
You jump around a lot of games.
But I was literally.
I've watched games with you before.
I was literally doing it in my living room by myself. Cool moment and cool outcome for the Crimson Tide. Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Visit Tuscaloosa, alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. All right, let's dive right in. The Alabama Crimson Tide had their first road test at Camp Randall Stadium in Madison on Saturday, and they passed it with flying colors. 42-10 the final. Quarterback Jalen Milroe continued to shine. He accounted for 5 touchdowns, 3 through the air and 2 on the ground. Milroe is the only player in school history with multiple passing and rushing touchdowns in 3 consecutive games. In fact, he's on a very small list of quarterbacks that have done it, period. His explosiveness was on display, and the Alabama offense, after a sluggish start, quite honestly, in the first quarter, got it going and rolled with 4 20-plus yard touchdowns in this one, giving them an FBS leading 13 20-plus yard touchdowns, Rodney, this season. Now, the miscues from the week before against South Florida were cleaned up. Much better on the penalties. Obviously, the offensive line with Caden Proctor-Beck at left tackle was not only better, they were great this week. And the defense was very efficient, holding Wisconsin to 10 points. They held them to 3 for 14 on third down, which next to points allowed is the most important stat I think a defense can have in football today. Alabama's giving up just 26 points in 3 games. That's a little more than 8 a game, and their third down defense has been phenomenal. Before I bring Rodney in for analysis, let's hear from the Alabama players after this big win.
Even in previous history about Alabama, Alabama is the best of the best. And, and people this year really don't think that we're the best since we got a new head coach, new OC. And, we just got to prove our point to people.
We want to be a home invasion, empty the stadium, and I feel like we did that. We could have did it a little earlier, but I think it was a good feeling. We're still figuring a lot of things out. I think we're in a good spot, but with this bye week, having this extra week, I think it was going to excel. I think we're going to excel for sure, having this time, be able to lock in on the defense.
All right, let me get Rodney in here. Rod, I felt like it was a complete performance in all 3 phases. Offense, defense, kicking game. Yeah, there were still a few mistakes, but let's not have – Alabama leads the country in revisionist history. And what I mean by that is going into this game, there were a lot of pundits around the country and analysts saying this is going to be a test. This is going to be a tough game. And I know Tyler Van Dyke, their quarterback, went down early. So sad to see probably out for the season with a knee. But now all of a sudden, well, Wisconsin's not any good. It's already started. I was – concerned about the game from the standpoint of a Big Ten team playing up there on the road, but I thought Alabama just looked great for the most part.
Yeah, I think the real key in the game, Gary, I thought was the drive right before half. The 2 plays, they go, 76 yards. Jalen Milroe makes a tremendous throw, obviously, there to Jeremy Bernard. And then they come back in the second half. They get the ball back, opening possession, and they go down and score, and all of a sudden it's a 28-3 game. Now, don't forget, Wisconsin had just missed a field goal right before half. They could have gone in 14-6. There's a huge difference.
Or even 14-10.
Could have.
Because their receiver beat Alabama on a quarter route, and the backup quarterback overthrew. So instead of 14-10, it was 21-3, pretty much game set match. Let's get to I guess Jalen had one of those games where he led the team in rushing, 14 carries for 75 yards. Justice Haynes and Jan Miller only had 11 carries between them. I thought they ran the ball well. They just didn't have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and again, I think Kalen DeBoer and Nick Sheridan kind of addressed that, talked about there were some more plays called to get the ball into the hands of Justice Haynes, but the reads went to other players in those play calls. But how about Jan Miller? His production was really good. He had 71 yards. I think it was on 9 carries, Gary, 10 carries, whatever it was. But Jalen Milroe, You mentioned all of the stats he's had. I mean, how phenomenal is it that you bring in a new coach, a new staff, a new offense, all of these new things, and the production that he's having? I mean, I think it speaks to his great athleticism for sure, but the way he's starting to develop, and we've always known he's been able to throw the long ball, but that throw right there was really something that I'm not sure we've seen him make too many times.
And there's a short list of quarterbacks that have opened the season with multiple touchdowns rushing and passing in 3 straight games. The last one was Colin Kaepernick at Nevada.
Yeah,
so
been a while.
Before we get to the defense, let's mention this offensive line again. I want to get your thoughts. This is the offensive line, and listen, Formby played, Vandermark played, but they started Proctor at left tackle, Booker at left guard, Brailsford at center, right guard was Jaden Robertson, the right tackle was Elijah Pritchett, and they are the offensive line of the week nationally. What a terrific performance.
Really was. I mean, there's a lot of chatter about Alabama's offensive line, but they really haven't had all the pieces together. Like you said, Wilkin Formby did get in the game. So did Geno Vandermark. I thought both of those guys played really well when they got in. But the group that started, Gary, the players of the week, you mentioned offensive line of the week. I think the offensive line, as they continue to develop, has a chance to be one of the big stories around college football or the SEC, because I think this Alabama offensive line has a chance to be really, really good.
Now let's get to the defense, and we'll get to the injury concerns in a moment. But the defense, again, bottom line is points allowed. They only allowed 10. I mean, and even though Wisconsin had a couple sustained drives, under 3 yards of total offense. But you have to affect the quarterback, and I think Alabama has found a guy that can do that on a consistent basis. LT Overton was a terror for that Wisconsin offensive line.
Yeah, LT, transfer from Texas A&M. Look at that. Wow. That was a pretty vicious hit, but he brings a lot of intensity, Gary. A lot of people don't remember he was the #1 player in the country overall coming out of high school. But he reclassified a year early, went to Texas A&M, was still a top 10 player. He kind of lost some weight. They wanted to kind of use him differently in the system they were utilizing. Got here, now he's back up to 280-plus pounds. Fits the system really, really well. He's very productive in these first few games.
Yeah, he had a great game. Overall, defensively, again, a really solid game. They did let a couple of receivers get free. That somewhere along the line, quarterbacks aren't going to miss those throws. They allowed a couple sustained drives, but they forced 2 turnovers, forced 4 fumbles, got on 2 of them. They were disruptive. And I think when you listen to Kane Womack talk, and he says there's a lot of the package they haven't even showed yet, they want to be disruptive. You don't want to give up huge plays, and you don't want to let people get behind you, but you also want to force turnovers, get in the backfield, and they did a good job of that.
Yeah, I think they're doing a lot of really good things. Just as we talked about the system offensively being different, how Jalen Milroe's adjusted, a lot of these players going through the same kind of adjustments on the defensive side with this new system. And you're right, they have been good on third downs, and they created some turnovers and all these types of things. I would say the one thing, Gary, that I look at is this run defense. They gave up over 200 yards against South Florida. They gave up 149 against Wisconsin, which has generally been a pretty good rushing team. I think they've got to get better against the run.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, sometimes it just seems to be the run fits. It just seems like sometimes guys maybe aren't where they're supposed to be, and as you said, that could be learning that new defense to some degree.
And Kane Womack talked about that. Got to get better fundamentally, technically, and all of those things.
All right, Rod, let's get to coach talk. Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe, as I mentioned, made history on Saturday, joining a short list of quarterbacks to produce multiple touchdowns on the ground and through the air in the first 3 games of a season. And as Coach DeBoer tells us in this week's Coach Talk segment, they're just scratching the surface in terms of what Jalen is capable of in this offense.
We are continuing to ask more and more of him as he gets more comfortable with what we do, and we know that is going to need to be the case. He has full reign right now. He knows what the expectations are and what we really prefer him to be doing with the checks, and he's been really solid, and that's going to be important for us going into SEC play. We know that for sure.
Rod Milroe's the SEC Co-Offensive Player of the Week, sharing the honor with Jackson Dart, the quarterback at Ole Miss. He's the Maxwell Award Player of the Week, Davey O'Brien National Player of the Week, Senior Bowl National Player of the Week, and as you heard Coach DeBoer say, and he's kind of scratching the surface. I said this before the season. I did. On my radio show, I said I think he's going to be a Heisman finalist. I think he's I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. So far, so good. But I think he can get better. Yeah,
look, I think you're 100% right. They're just putting these pieces together offensively. I think the first couple of games, they were kind of still learning a lot, and they will continue to learn a lot about each other, their players, and all of those things. But I think Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan are just now starting to really put the pieces together with what they see they can do offensively. I think as you get about another 3 weeks into this season, Gary, 3 games, this offense could be really, really good.
Bye week, of course, before Georgia. Georgia's also got a bye. One concern, Rodney, is some players got banged up. Quay Russaw, who's an emerging star as an edge rusher. Malachi Moore, who's the glue in the secondary, and young running back Richard Young. We don't know for sure what their status is going to be for the Georgia game, but 3 injuries in one game, that was the one negative, I guess.
Yeah, and you take the positive for that is, Gary, it looks like, again, we don't know the status of Richard Young, but when you're talking about Malachi Moore with the hit he took to the head, and the other injuries that they've had, Quay Russaw, I think the fortunate thing is you're not losing him for the season.
Yeah, and got a week. More on the bye week coming up. I know we got an email about it. It's unusual to have a bye week this early, but it seems like it's coming at a good time. Well, still to come on TITV, Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa suffered another concussion last week against the Buffalo Bills, and now today Miami makes an announcement on his immediate future. We'll have that for you. And more bad news for former Bama quarterbacks. Carolina Panthers benching former Heisman Trophy winner and number 1 overall pick Bryce Young, just number 1 overall pick from last year. Already benched 2 games into the season. We'll discuss, what's going on with the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young. And in just a little bit, we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, that phone number, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Bama's 3-0. Got Georgia next week, but we're still bringing the heat. Bye week or not, TITV is coming right back after this. And welcome back to Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Visit Tuscaloosa. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Back in March, Mac Jones was traded from the Patriots to the Jacksonville Jaguars to be a backup, leaving Alabama with 3 of its former quarterbacks starting in the NFL. That number would be down to 1 in week 3, as it's been a rough week for former Crimson Tide QBs. Let's start with Tua. Through no fault of his own, the Miami Dolphins have placed Tua on the injured reserve list, meaning that the quarterback, after suffering another concussion in Thursday's loss to the Buffalo Bills, per NFL rules, must remain on IR for at least 4 games. And there's no timetable for how long Miami plans to keep him on IR as he focuses on his health before his return to the field. Now, there are reports out of Miami that Tua has indicated that he wants to play again, but this is the 3rd diagnosed concussion of Tua's NFL career, and it is believed, remember, that he had one at Alabama as well. So before we get to Bryce Young, Rodney, Tua's future in the NFL, let me just say this. I said this on my radio show, and I don't know that I'm right, but this is the way I feel about it. A lot of people are coming in and saying he needs to retire, he needs to do this. Listen, it's Tua's decision. I'll respect whatever he decides to do. But who am I to tell NFL quarterback that just signed a $255 million contract that he shouldn't play? What I mean by that is if he wants to play, he should be able to play. It's his life. It's his family. I'm sure they'll take all the medical advice, but I'm not going to sit here and tell him he needs to retire. Who am I to tell him that? Yeah. But if he wants to, certainly I would understand it. Mm-hmm. But football players want to play football. And people say, well, he signed that big contract. Yeah, he feels a responsibility to his team, Rodney. That's the nature of a competitor and nature of a thoughtful person like Tua. I'm sure he feels responsibility to his teammates. Yeah, again, I understand it from a fan's perspective. It's certainly looking out for his health. And, we all certainly hope that Tua gets better. And does not, if he continues to play, continue to suffer these types of injuries. But the one thing I will say, Gary, just a slight disagreement. I think part of this is on Tua. We've talked about this many, many times before. He's got to learn to protect himself. He's got to do a better job of protecting himself. You look at 99% of Tua's injuries. Yeah. When he was here at Alabama, he's been in the NFL. Tua, get rid of the ball. Get down on the ground. Protect yourself. I watched Jalen Hurts last night. Jalen, as physical as he is, he'll take on tacklers, don't get me wrong. But I saw a couple of times Jalen had an opportunity to continue to run. He got down on the ground, he protected himself. The only thing I'll say to that, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but what I am saying is he's a competitor. You're getting beat by a team that's had your number. It's 4th down. If he slides, they're going to spot him where he slides, and he doesn't get the first down. And not that he was thinking that in the moment. He's trying to get the first down. But then he's going to take criticism. Well, he's not tough enough. He went down and, he was trying to get a first down for his team. And I just think in that moment, Rodney, it wasn't on his mind about sliding. It was about getting a first down. So I'm going to defend him
there's no
in
doubt.
regards
And
to that.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying somehow
But overall,
he's got to figure out a way if he's going to continue to play to protect himself.
Yeah, he's not going to be able to continue to play if he keeps taking those hits. All right, let's get to the Carolina Panthers. They benched 2023 number 1 overall draft pick Bryce Young, the second-year quarterback's rough start to the season, only 2 games in. And listen, he had struggled. There's no doubt about it. But that's a bad team. That's a bad organization. And initially I was like, yeah, Dave Canales, I get it. Andy Dalton, 36-year-old veteran. But basically what Canales has done is thrown Bryce Young under the bus. He didn't draft Bryce Young. He came in. And let me say this, Rod. Again, I don't know about avoiding injuries, but he didn't play him in the preseason. 1 series. With a new coaching staff, your second coach, you're still a 23-year-old quarterback. How do you get ready to play if you don't play in the preseason? And I think he's been set up for failure there, and I think this will probably be the end for him with the Carolina Panthers. I think that unless Dalton's hurt, he's going to be the backup, and at some point he's going to be with another team.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because, Gary, sometimes, all the time, I think a quarterback, when you don't have the people around you, especially in that league, if you don't have the people around you, it's really tough.
And let's talk about this. And Mac Jones is a backup now. I think Mac Jones will be a starter again, too. But let's say this. Let's be honest. When they were playing at Alabama, they were playing with great players, okay? Whether it's Jalen, whether it was A.J. McCarron, whether it's Tua, whether it's Bryce, whether it's Mac, whether it's Jalen Milroe, you're playing with the creme de la creme. Unfortunately, when you get in the NFL, that's not always the case. Bryce is on the worst team in the league. You know, they say anybody can beat anybody in that league. I don't know if the Panthers can beat anybody.
Worst team in the league playing against the creme de la creme.
Yeah, so it's been tough for him. But I'll tell you this, he's got his head on his shoulders correctly. He'll get through this. All right, when we come back, we're going to get to phone calls, emails, and tweets. Give us a call. And also the Alabama men's golf team opening the fall campaign in style last week at the Folds of Honor. We'll have that for you. And as I said, we'll get to those phone calls. 205-348-9882 is the number. Go ahead and give us a call. We're a little bit over because Rodney and I have been talking a lot tonight, but we'll get some phone calls in next. Milkshake time at Lake Michigan last Wednesday as the number 16 ranked Alabama men's golf team opened the 2024 fall season in style, winning the prestigious Folds of Honor Collegiate at the Jack Nicklaus Design American Dunes Golf Club. Alabama bested the 15-team field with a score of 12 under par, outdistancing second place Illinois by 7 shots. Additionally, Dominic Clemens, playing in his first tournament with Alabama, won medalist honors with a marvelous score of 9 under par. Big-time win. Alabama celebrates when they win by drinking milkshakes. And this also is a special tournament, Rodney. The money there goes to veterans, families, and people that have been hurt in the war to help their kids go to school. So great start for Alabama men's golf. Looking good. All right, welcome back into TITV. Now, listen, we're not probably going to get as many phone calls tonight because I know many of you are aware, and you may not be watching this if you are aware, but we're having some technical issues. We're not on a lot of the different TV providers right now, so we don't have near the viewership that we normally do. But we do have some emails, and if people are watching us on the stream or able to watch us on a HD antenna and want to call in, 205-348-9882, phone lines are open. In the meantime, let's get to the email question of the day, brought to you by KDM Service Corporation. KDM Service Corporation, when it comes to heating and air conditioning, serving your family like our family. All right, please discuss the performance and emergence of LT Overton in the Wisconsin game. That's from Quintillion in Charleston, Illinois. He also put a note on his email that Ben Hess, the former Alabama pitcher that was number 1 pick of the Yankees this year, is from Charleston, Illinois. Quintillion, we talked a lot about him, but it was dynamic, man. You guys that can get after the quarterback are at a premium, whether it's high school, college, or the NFL. And as we've already talked about, Overton, boy, he tattooed.
You know, that was textbook there, Gary, because look, that could have, if he gets up a little bit higher, that's potential targeting.
Got his head to the side and drilled him. But really, he played well. He's another one of these guys that he's only going to get better.
Yeah, I really like LT Overton. I thought by mid-season, Gary, he'd be a guy that would be really starting to emerge, but he's gotten it going even earlier.
Yeah, and again, that defensive front, some run issues right now. Got gashed at times. You've already talked about that. But they're finding playmakers. And one thing I like about this defensive line, extremely athletic, and they've got depth. They've got some numbers. They can rotate some guys in and out.
They do have depth. They do have numbers, as you said. I think they've got some guys that, look, Tim Keenan, we haven't mentioned him. Last week he was the defensive lineman of the week. He's doing a tremendous job on that interior. I think Jaheim Otis, we haven't seen the best of him yet. We haven't seen the best of Damon Payne. I think James Smith, I'm not saying he's been quiet. You just hadn't seen him as kind of flash as much as maybe we expected. They've got players, if they can get the unit playing as a whole, Gary, and get some of those guys really playing playing at that same level, I think this would be a really good defensive line.
All right, our next email is in regard to the defensive line as well. Did Jaheim Otis play against Wisconsin? That's from Tyler in Pell City. He did. He played some. I don't think he played a ton of snaps. He's number 10 in this video. But he is a guy that, again, big, powerful defensive lineman. Hey, listen, he didn't do as much in fall camp, coming off an injury. I still think they're trying to kind of get him up to speed.
I think Jaheim Otis has a world of potential. I mean, he's a guy that should be big time. And again, Gary, you mentioned he's number 10 here. A lot of people were looking for 91. They didn't know that he's changed his number to 10.
All right, coming up here on Tighter Insider TV, Alabama players had another exceptional week in the National Football League in terms of performances. We'll tell you about some of the best when we come back with Alabama in the NFL update. And hopefully we can get some phone calls. Again, I know we're not on a lot of the TV providers right now, but if you are watching and you want to get through, now would be a good time because we're certainly down on phone call numbers tonight. 205-348-9882 is the number. If not, we've got another email to get to, and we got more Crimson Tide football discussion when we return to Tighter Insider TV here on WVOA 23. More Bama in the NFL. Calvin Ridley had a 40-yard touchdown catch. He had a nice game. 4 receptions, 77 yards. The Titans lost again in a game that they probably should have won. Brian Robinson Jr., man, he just powers through people. 133 yards. He's got deceptive speed, too, for the Commanders. They got to win over the Giants. Josh Jacobs without Jordan Love at quarterback. They had Malik Willis. They didn't throw it much. That's okay. Jacobs ran for 151 yards as the Packers got to win over the Colts. And Packers safety Xavier McKinney, big pickup, as was Jacobs. He had an interception in the game. Also, Will Reichard had some big field goals for the Vikings as they beat the 49ers. Derrick Henry had a touchdown and over 80 yards rushing every week. Bama in the NFL. It's big-time entertainment. All right, we got time for one more email real quickly. Do you guys like having Alabama having a bye week this early? Ronald in Tuscaloosa. Rodney, yeah.
I do. You've had 3 games. I think it gives you a chance to kind of rest up in the big game coming up against Georgia.
And remember, Georgia's got it, too. All right, we'll come back and wrap up this edition of TITV right after this. Stay with us. Next week, our Georgia preview and our Georgia score predictions. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Tighter Insider TV, presented by Visit Tuscaloosa. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. We're going to leave you with some video tonight of that amazing scene last night at Tuscaloosa T-Mobile store. Jalen Milroe and Ryan Williams, Rodney, they pack them in, don't they?
Sure
they were lined up around the block. A reminder, you can catch a replay of the show tonight at 10:30 on WVOA 23 or anytime at WVOA23.com. Have a great night, everybody. Roll Tide.